And we're live. And with me, I have Edgy Sphinx. Welcome.
Greetings. Good afternoon.
Let's see. So, have you ever been a feminist?
I actually was a feminist when I was a teenager and into my early 20s. Um, Basically, I sort of accepted the whole dictionary definition thing and didn't really think too much beyond it. Um, and I had a lot of female friends, and most of them were feminists, and I sort of let that color my perception of what feminists and feminist groups were actually doing in the world.
Did you buy any feminist books?
I didn't buy any, but I did. I did read some here and there. I would read feminist blogs, and I was very active on Reddit for several years of my life, and Reddit is very left wing. So there's a lot of feminists on Reddit. So sort of formed a bit of an echo chamber for me.
Did you have any crazy beliefs or were you a moderate?
Um, I mean, I did sort of accept the whole thing of like, most men are sexist or most men think less of women, just the typical things that feminists say about men. I did accept a lot of that. And I guess I was kind of a victim of the whole one good man syndrome, where it was like, oh, well, most men don't realize these things and I'm one of the good ones, like that kind of thing.
But did you feel like it was all like, did you have like a good father, good brothers, or were there good guys in your school that you've noticed treated women well, or or was your father or brother just kind of like reinforced negative things you thought about men?
Well, I mean, my dad was great growing up. He worked a lot, so we probably didn't spend as much time together as I would have liked as a kid. But he was never, he was never what you would call a bad father or anything like that. He just worked really hard, and I didn't see much of him. Um, so maybe that could have, even though it wasn't a negative thing, and he wasn't really like a bad dad or anything, maybe that could have contributed something where I just didn't have a male role model around as much as I would have liked, because he would work all day, almost every day, and and I would see him for maybe a few hours a day when I was a kid. So
Yeah, because I'm wondering if anything like reinforced, like if there was anything that you could think of that probably reinforced that you were one of the few good at things, or were they good men in your school, and you just kind of blocked out all the good men you met in your school, like you saw, but you kind of like ignored it.
um I was kind of a nerdy kid. I was a little bit of a social outcast. So I think maybe that could have contributed something to it, where it was like, I would see the the football players, or the athletic guys, who tended to get more attention from women, and at the same time, those same women would come and complain to me about those guys. So I think that may have fed into it a little bit of, it could have just been a jealousy thing, which I think that's really typical of a lot of so-called male feminists, where they're just sort of envious of other men, and they're envious of not getting as much female attention as they would like, and so they sort of blame other men for that instead of blaming themselves, or blaming those women, or whatever. I think people have an easier time blaming men for things in general than they do blaming women. So
Well, you did say that girls did come to you complaining about them.
that's true, but it was mostly in a platonic kind of way. I had a lot of female friends, but not really a ton of girlfriends until later on, when I kind of became more confident and started becoming less and less feminist, and just kind of being more assertive, as opposed to sidelining myself.
Uh, so do you think they ever took advantage of you, or did they treat you very well?
Um, I don't want to say that a lot of women took advantage of me. Maybe there were a few girls here and there who, if they knew that I liked them or something like that, they would kind of use that to their advantage. But for the most part, I think most of the female friends that I've had were pretty nice, and they didn't really treat me that way. They were just kind of there.
Okay, I see you had a happy childhood.
Yeah, for the most part, I had a good childhood. I just didn't really go out much or you know go to parties in high school very much. I didn't really party much until my 20s. So,
Okay. Why are you an anti-feminist?
um, first and foremost, I think what pushed me away from being a feminist to begin with was just some of the experiences I had in actual relationships with women. I had this one girlfriend who, we would. It was one of those like really turbulent relationships where it was either extremely happy or extremely negative. When we got along, it was great, and we loved each other. Loved being around each other, I should say, very much. But when we didn't get along, the fights were really extreme, and shouting matches and everything. And sometimes she would even try to get physical, like throw punches and things like that. Um, and I never ever hit her back. But that just made it worse when we finally broke up and she went around telling people that I was the abusive one, that I was the one hitting her and things like that. And up until that point, I had considered myself a feminist, but having lived that experience firsthand and known that I never did anything like that to her, and yet here she was going around saying these things to people, it sort of opened my eyes to the fact that, hey, maybe women do lie about these things sometimes, and maybe there are a lot of men who have been in the same situation who didn't do anything like that, but they're being accused of it, and people are just blindly believing it. That was one of the things that really pushed me towards. I mean, I don't even know if I would necessarily say that I'm an anti-feminist per se. I just sort of get put into that position of being against feminism because I don't like to just believe things at face value. I don't like to just accept what people are claiming. I want them to prove it. I want them to show that what they're alleging actually happened.
So you were led to um, anti-feminist, even though you wouldn't call yourself an anti-feminist, you were still led to somewhat skeptical viewpoints because of an abusive relationship. Is that correct?
Yes, that's pretty much how I would put it. I mean, overall, I would consider myself a gender egalitarian or an equalist or any one of these words where, I think that people should be given the same legal consideration. Everyone should be treated equitably under the law, and we shouldn't just believe an alleged victim just because they say that something happened to them. They should have to demonstrate that this actually happened,
Um,
whether it's a man or a woman or whoever.
do you consider yourself and your friends, like back when you were a feminist, do you consider yourself and your friends brainwashed and indoctrinated into it? Like, do you feel like the school system perhaps indoctrinated you into it?
Um, at the time, when I was in public school, I'm not sure that as much of that was going on. I never had like a women's studies class in high school or anything like that. And when I went to college, I went to a private uh, arts college. So there wasn't a whole lot of that going on there either. But as far as my friends go, most of my friends were feminists and like progressive types, and a lot of them went to public community colleges and things like that. And I think there probably was a lot of that going on in the community colleges because they were the ones who would come to me with all the women's studies stuff. And as I became less and less feminist, we started to have more and more arguments about it. um, I remember having a conversation with one of my feminist friends maybe like 5 years ago about about affirmative consent and about the whole enthusiastic consent thing, and I was basically coming at it from a logical, like skeptical position, and I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Are we all going to sign a consent form? Are we all going to fill out paperwork every time we have a sexual experience? And we all kind of laughed about it like it was a joke. And now, flash forward to now, and there are actually public colleges and public community colleges providing these consent forms to students because of the whole false accusation stuff that's going on. So I sort of, it's just weird seeing this thing that you used to joke about become a real thing, and it's like, did you guys even listen? It's like this narrative just keeps trucking on, becoming more and more ridiculous, and things that used to be funny are now reality.
So, you were indoctrinated into it, or?
I think whatever indoctrination I may have experienced was probably mostly social pressure, because, like I say, I wasn't really getting that in the public. I don't know what public schools are like now, but when I was in public school, I don't feel like that was really coming from the curriculum. It was more coming from friends that I had who were into the whole progressivism, political correctness stuff, and they were kind of feeding me that stuff.
Okay. What is your inspiration to make your YouTube videos?
Well, I mean, I've noticed in real life, trying to talk about all the social justice warrior stuff with people I know in real life, it seems like a lot of people don't really want to hear it. And it's not necessarily that they agree with it. I think that the vast majority of people probably don't agree with all the political correctness and feminism stuff that's going on. But at the same time, they don't really care either. And part of my motivation was to kind of show people like how this can be dangerous, and why this is important, like, because we're in a situation where free speech is at risk, free expression is at risk. And we have people talking about like that, like there was that Oxford Union debate about whether or not people have the right to offend others. And I felt like that was sort of a reframing of the right to free expression. It's not about a right to offend. There's no such thing as a right to offend. You have the right to express yourself as you please. And if other people are offended, that's their problem. You're not violating someone else's rights by offending them. That's their choice to be offended. So to sum it up, I think the reason why I wanted to make videos was because I think the more people talk about these issues, the better, because this is a very serious thing. I mentioned in one of my recent videos about the whole Facebook censorship thing, how they were manipulating the trending topics, to change what people are seeing in their news feeds. I mentioned at the end of that video that 40% of millennials, according to Pew Research Center, they do this annual global attitudes survey. And the survey they did last year found that 40% of millennials would be okay with putting restrictions on speech if that speech is offensive to minorities. And I think that's really dangerous because, obviously offense is such a subjective thing. Anybody could say that they're offended at anything. So if you start putting restrictions like that on speech, it's like, where does it stop? So basically, I just think that we need as many people talking about this stuff as possible. We need to get the word out about this and show people why this is so dangerous.
Are you an MRA?
I mean, I guess in the sense that I recognize the fact that there are issues that men face that are specific to men. And in the sense that I care about those issues, I guess you could say that technically I'm an MRA, but I feel like that term has just become so poisonous and so maligned in the mainstream media. It's just come to be associated with hating women. And as much as I disagree with that, there are a lot of people who will just stop listening to you the second that you say you're an MRA. And I mean, it's a hard question because in the short answer, yes, I am. But the long answer is that I prefer not to call myself that because there's so much baggage attached to it, and it's sort of just like it's like a a scarlet letter of sorts. You know, it's basically just a signal for people to stop listening to what you have to say the second you admit that about yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, because on a technicality, there are men's rights issues that I care about, but I wouldn't want to call myself an MRE either because I don't want people to automatically shut out anything I have to say.
Right.
So, what would you say to the people who would say, well, do you advocate for men's rights? Therefore, you're a men's rights advocate. So you should go around saying you're a men's rights advocate because you are advocating for men's rights.
I have seen other YouTubers like the Honey Badgers or Dr. Random or Cam. You know, I'm actually a big fan of his. I love his videos, and I agree with him probably 99% of the time. Um, but I feel like it's a little bit of a semantic sort of thing. You know, it's I feel like it almost doesn't matter, and what matters is what I'm actually saying, what I'm actually advocating for, not so much what I call myself. You know, like for instance, there are people like Christina Hoff Sommers or Kathy Young or Camille Paglia who they all call themselves feminists, but they also advocate for men's rights, and they actually do they spend quite a lot of time talking about men's issues and talking about how society has certain prejudices against men. Um, so I almost feel like it doesn't really matter too much what you call yourself. It matters what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve.
I totally agree with you on that. And to me, it just leans towards identity politics, where,
Right.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I kind of cut you off there. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just saying that it leans towards identity politics, where people put too much pressure on what you call yourself. When really, I don't like labels because I don't like how people would automatically shut your ideas down. And to me, with their logic, well, we know what black means, we know what life means, we know what matter means, but nobody wants to call themselves a Black Lives Matter person,
Mhm.
even though I believe that Black lives matter, but I also believe that white lives matter and Asian lives matter, all lives matter.
Right. I mean, and I think that Black Lives Matter are kind of trying to they're trying to make this distinction where it's like, oh, well, you either call yourselves, you either say that you support Black Lives Matter, or you don't. That means that you don't think Black Lives Matter, and it's just kind of this silly linguistic game that they're playing, where it's like, no, I value human life in general. So if I value human life, then that means that, of course, I think Black Lives Matter. I never said that I didn't think Black Lives Matter, you know? So they're kind of trying to play this. It's like saying you're anti racist or anti fascist or something like that. It's like you're trying to imply that, oh, well, you either call yourself anti fascist, or if you don't, then you must be a fascist. Or you either call yourself anti racist, and if you don't, then you must be a racist. You know, they're just it's just such a divisive label. You know, they could have called themselves something like police brutality matters, or police violence matters, or something like that, and then would have been much more likely to support what they're doing. But instead, they've taken this tack of like, oh well, we're just going to say Black Lives Matter, and anyone who doesn't completely agree with us on everything hates Black people.
Yeah, yeah, but to me, the whole MRA thing and Black Lives Matter thing, there are some similarities in the sense that yes, they're totally different, but it's like, we know what men mean, we know what rights mean, we know what advocate mean, but that doesn't mean that you want to call yourself a men's rights advocate because you care about women's, problems too, like women are suffering in the Middle East. And
Right.
I know what black means, I know what life means, I know what matters means, but I think that all lives matter. And I would just rather if I'm going to call myself anything, then I would want to call myself that has the more humans as a collective.
Yeah. Ultimately, I would probably call myself, like I was saying before, gender egalitarian or human rights advocate or something along those lines of, I think that everyone deserves equitable treatment. No one should be um, really prioritized too much over anyone else, because I think you could say that any group has some kind of issue endemic to that group.
Exactly, every single group is going to have a problem specific to that group, which is why I'm just, a human rights advocate.
Right.
Okay, next question. Are you now or have you ever been a MGTOW person, or is there anything in MGTOW that you agree with?
Um, MGTOW is an interesting question because, on the one hand, being against feminism and sort of identifying with some of the MRA causes, I can see things like the way men are treated in family courts, for instance, the way they lose their children and they have their homes taken away from them, their cars and their finances and all that stuff. That's definitely a problem. That's definitely something that's happening, and it is really unfair to men. So I can sort of see where MGTOWs are coming from on those issues. But at the same time, there are a lot of extreme MGTOWs out there who basically are like the polar opposite of feminists, and they just want to blame everything wrong with the world on women. The women control everything. Everything is the women's fault, and I wouldn't necessarily call myself a MGTOW because of those things. Um, because honestly, most women have very little influence over society. They don't really. It's not like women are part of some big conspiracy to keep the men down. It's just that part of human nature is that we recognize that women are where more humans come from. So I think that we sort of have this natural compassion towards women that we don't always have for men. But that doesn't mean that we should hate all women or that we should blame everything on women. So I guess the short answer is that I do understand where some MGTOWs are coming from. I understand the general sense of the idea, because I do sort of struggle with that myself, where it's like I don't necessarily want to get into too serious of a relationship because I don't know what the bad outcome of that could be. But at the same time, I don't want to completely swear off women and say, oh, well, I'm taking my ball and going home. I would like to have a relationship and a family someday, So I guess I understand it, but I wouldn't really fully endorse it.
Do you consider America to be a very feminist country?
Um, I think it depends. In some ways, yeah, but we're not as far down the line as a country like Canada or Sweden or basically anywhere in Europe. Really, most of Europe. Um, there are definitely some issues like the whole family court thing, where people have been trying to get reform for decades. I actually mentioned this in one of my other videos too. There was this bill that the Florida State Senate recently passed to reform the family court laws down there, and they were going to change the way alimony is awarded, um, to make it more equitable between men and women, to make it more fair, and they were also going to guarantee 50-50 custody between the parents of children, assuming that no abuse has been alleged or anything like that. They were going to give equal custody to parents, and it passed the Florida State Senate overwhelmingly. Something like, I think it was like 73 or 74% of the Senate voted in favor of this, and Governor Scott Walker actually vetoed the bill just because feminist groups and women's groups asked him to veto it, because they claimed that it would be harmful to women. So I think in some sense, I think even though most of the leaders in America are still male, there's definitely a lot of consideration given to women's issues, and I feel like they sort of really care what women think, um, even if it would be against democracy or against equal treatment. to make these feminist groups happy, they'll still go along with what those feminist groups want. So, and what I find really interesting about it is that Scott Walker is a conservative Republican. You know, he's I don't know if he's an evangelical, but he is a conservative Christian, probably a traditionalist kind of person. And I think it just goes to show you that what feminists want and what traditionalists want, it's not really that different, because basically feminists are fine with inequitable treatment as long as that inequitable treatment benefits women somehow. You know, they only have a problem with it if it benefits men over women. So I think in a lot of ways, America is a very feminist country, probably more feminist than feminists like to say it is.
I found it interesting because this is the very first time I've heard of it. Florida was going to have 50-50 custody for men and women so long as no abuse have taken place. And it was overwhelmingly popular. But feminists, a conservative no less, got a vetoed it because of feminist groups.
Yeah, I mean, basically they just petitioned him and they said, well, you know, we're going to make a big stink if you don't veto this bill, and we don't care that most of the Senate wanted it, and we don't care that this is undemocratic. We don't like the effect this is going to have on women. So we want you to veto this, or we're going to make a big stink and we're going to smear you and make you look like a horrible woman hater. So, you know, he is a politician, so he's pretty much a coward, and he went along with what they wanted.
Mm. Yeah, feminism does seem like a big bully, and I'm pretty sure you agree with that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, because that's essentially how they get everything that they get. They just threaten people and say, "Oh, well, we'll call you a misogynist," and that's really one of the worst things that you can be called in this society, in any Western society, is being accused of hating women or being sexist or misogynist. And the thing I find really ironic about that is that if American society, if Western society really were so sexist and misogynistic and hated women, if that were true, then calling someone a sexist or a misogynist would have no power. You know, like in a sexist society, if you call someone a sexist, everyone would just be like, psh, okay, whatever. But in this society, you call someone that, and their career is over. You know, they look like a giant asshole, and you pretty much get everything you want after that.
Mm.
So it's one of the many contradictions in the feminist belief system, that they claim that society is so sexist against women, and yet that's one of the most powerful accusations that you can make against someone, right up with calling them racist. You know, and I would use the same logic there. You know, if we really lived in a sexist or racist or homophobic society, calling people those things would have no power.
Yeah, it reminds me of during the satanic panic hysteria, how the worst thing you could ever be called is a devil worshiper. And if anybody called you a devil worshiper, you can lose your career.
Hmm.
Mm. Yeah, in this sense, I do think that people could learn from Donald Trump because Donald Trump, he doesn't care. And I think that the problem is that, politicians are cowardly, and, they don't stand up, for themselves. And, it's the same thing with Tracer's butts. Only one person complained about Tracer's butts.
Oh, the whole Overwatch thing, yeah.
Yeah, only one person complained about Tracer's butts, but Overwatch still changed it. And it's kind of like, you know, there would always be complainers. Complainers are not going to go anywhere. I mean, I just got finished reading The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, and he had a story at the end, pretty fictional because he over exaggerated some bits and fabricated some bits. Very few of it was true, but he just talked about complainers, and it's really to just make the story more interesting. But my point is, complainers, I mean, they existed in the 1400s. I'm pretty sure that they existed during, the time of a Jesus I don't believe in. I'm pretty sure they've always existed, and they would always existed. To me, my bigger problem is people who cannot stand up to these bullies, people who would just, give in to bullying. And I don't respect how people give in to bullying.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I like about Donald Trump is, I don't agree with him on everything, but love him or hate him, you have to respect somebody who just doesn't give a fuck like that, and is just kind of has this attitude of like, oh well, let people complain, let people call me whatever they want. I don't fucking care. He says what he really thinks, and doesn't care, what people want to say about him for it, and I do respect that. You know, and
I,
I think even his detractors are sort of learning to respect that because they've tried so hard throughout this entire election. They've tried so hard to call him every terrible thing in the book, and he just doesn't give a shit. And now look at him. He won the nomination. He very well could win the presidency at this rate, and he just kind of proved everybody wrong.
I do think that the other Republicans could learn from Donald Trump. I mean, I don't view him as a real Republican, but I do think that the other Republicans could learn from Donald Trump because I know that the liberal media, like Saturday Night Live, keeps slandering the Republican Party, and in the liberal media, you're likely to be called a racist if you're a Republican. Republican equals racist to the liberal media, and I do think that they could learn from Donald Trump the power of not caring. Like, call me what you want. I'm going to say whatever I want to say, whatever. And I do think that if Republicans could just learn from Trump, that the Republican Party would be more successful because bullies only have as much power as you give them because
Right.
very few people in America are actually feminists. Like, the last time I checked, only 18% of Americans are feminists. It's just usually the bigger voices are feminists, like celebrities and whatnot.
Right. I mean, they kind of puff themselves up and make themselves seem like there are more of them than there actually are by just being louder than everyone else, even though they're in the minority.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like back to the Florida people, the feminists may say, we're going to call you a woman hater and we're going to say this about you. But with very few people, being feminist, would it even have much of a effect? Not only that, but most people don't trust the news anyway. Like, most people know that journalism has a bias, that journalism is crooked, they spin things, I mean, look at
Yeah.
Amazing Atheist. The Amazing Atheist, I believe, almost has 1 million subscribers now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact number, but I remember reading recently that public trust in the media is pretty much lower than it's ever been. I don't remember the exact approval rating, but people know that that so-called journalists, what we pass off as journalists now, are basically always working an angle, and they're always trying to push their own perspective, and people have gotten really wise to that. And personally, I even though I'm kind of more on the conservative side now, I used to be very liberal, progressive, leftist. Um, but even though I'm more on the conservative side, I still avoid reading nothing but conservative outlets. I still read Slate and Salon and Raw Story and websites like that because uh, you need to look at all the different perspectives, and usually the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Because everyone always leaves out, like Fox News might leave out a particular detail, and then Raw Story will mention a different detail, but they'll leave out the details that Fox News mentioned. And, you know, when you combine all those things together, you see the whole picture.
What feminist aspects do you see in our country that you would like to see changed?
Definitely the stuff about family courts, because, you know, as a man, you have a lot to lose in that regard, because if you marry the wrong woman and things don't work out, she can basically take everything from you, and you're basically, she owns you for the rest of your life. And I understand the historical reasons for that, like the traditionalist reasons for that, but we don't live in a traditionalist society anymore, so we shouldn't have those standards anymore. And the other big thing that I find concerning is the way we handle rape accusations, and, you know, going back to the media, the way the media handles rape accusations. You know, like, so for instance, something like the what's her name, Jackie from UVA, the whole rape on campus thing, where Rolling Stone, that journalist, I can't, her name escapes me at the moment, but she basically just believed everything that the alleged victim said. She didn't do any real investigative journalism, and she pretty much totally portrayed the story as though it actually happened, when she had no evidence for that. She had nothing to back up what she was writing, and UVA wound up looking really bad for it. The fraternity wound up looking really bad for it, and then it turned out that none of this was true. You know, none of these guys did what that Jackie girl said that they did. Um, and it just really shows how the media is more concerned with an exciting, you know, shocking, juicy story than they are with the truth. You know, and that, I think that definitely ties into feminism, because they're always saying, oh, well, there's a rape culture, and, you know, we live in a society that celebrates rape, and, you know, and says that women deserve to be raped, and then something like that can happen. You know, I don't really think that those two things are reconcilable. You know, if anything, we live in a culture of rape hysteria, you know, where people are ready to get upset about it and ready to get excited about it, whether there's actually proof or not.
Yes, I do think that this hysteria would backfire and eventually die down, because the Salem witch trials, the European witch trials, that was hysteria. The satanic panic area, that was a bunch of hysteria, and it all eventually would disappear. But I mean, it's going to be a bad mark in history, and I don't know how far it's going to sink. But the more we hurts men, men are half of the society. Not only are the men half of society, but men and women, it takes both to create a child. And it takes both to help raise a child properly, because it would be bad if a kid grew up without his father. You know, a kid is probably not going to turn out too well. And eventually, if people do not wake up to what they're doing now, it could lead to society to collapse, because there are things that men could do that women simply just can't do, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think fathers are very important in a child's development. And even though I was saying earlier I didn't see as much of my dad as I probably would have liked as a kid, you know, at least I had him in my life as a provider, and as a father figure on some level, you know. And you know, you can't tell me that I would be the same person if it had been just my mom, and if my dad just hadn't been around. Um, you know, and that's another, I'm glad you brought this up, because that's another issue, another result of feminism that I think really needs to change is single motherhood has been on the rise for the last few decades, and it's not a good thing. You know, that I think it's something like 30% of new, I don't remember the exact number, but it's a significant portion of children being raised by single mothers with no fathers. Um, and I think it all goes back to the fact that, you know, men and women are different. You know, we think differently. You know, we handle things differently, and we have different strengths and weaknesses. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It means that if men and women work together, they're better than if they try to do things on their own. You know?
I think feminism is causing women to become more and more vindictive. It's kind of a lot like there's nothing wrong with, the both men and women having 50-50. Like the kid spends 1 week with their mother and the kid spends 1 week with their father. But I just think women are becoming more and more vindictive now because of feminism, mainly because feminism justifies you it justifies vindictiveness, basically. It justifies vindictive behavior, and it gives, women an excuse to behave vindictively, when I believe that earlier it would be frowned upon on a society levels, and people would say, you're harming the child, you're harming the child. But nowadays, when a woman is being vindictive, feminists has their back. When I think years ago, it like, think of the child, you're being selfish, and women would probably be more inclined back then.
Yeah, I mean, I think feminism has moved beyond getting equitable treatment, and it's moved into inequitable treatment in the opposite direction, and it's sort of become about sticking it to men, and showing those damn dirty men, what for. It's not really about equality anymore. It's sort of it's sort of this culture of oh well, men are the cause of everything wrong in society. Men are in charge of everything, and so it's okay to hurt men as a result. It's a sort of revenge narrative kind of thing. Like I remember earlier in the year, back in January, I remember seeing this hashtag waste his time, and it was basically these young women on Twitter talking about how, oh well, you should get guys to match you on Tinder, and then you should, get him to take you out and pay for your dinner and all that stuff, and then, don't fuck him and don't see him again, and basically just make him feel like shit on purpose, just get a free meal out of it. And I don't know how many women actually did this. I don't have any specific numbers on it, but I'm sure there are at least some women out there who did that and enjoyed it. And if so, that's fucked up, because I wouldn't do that to someone. It's just petty.
Hmm. Yeah, but again, I really don't see feminism lasting for a long time. I surely don't see it lasting as long as Christianity, because what they're doing is going to cause the society to collapse, because most women are straight. Not only are most women straights, like I believe it's like 98% of people are straights in America, but it's kind of like I don't think men are going to put up with this for too much, because the vast majority of men, I think it's like 67% of men think feminism is stupid. So I do think that men are just going to eventually have enough. And it's not like feminists could put, 67% of men in prison or destroy 67% of men's lives without totally and completely breaking society down. And if men just really have enough, I mean really have enough, it's kind of like, I don't know, the MGTOW philosophy may just get more popular, and you know it's kind of like with so many women, with so many people being straight, in the end most people would want a relationship and companionship. Even women want love and companion. It may eventually just cause a gender rift and a gender divide, where men would no longer want to pander to women anymore. And if women want to do something, they'll just have to get it on their own. It would just eventually just really, really backfire if it doesn't end soon. And unfortunately, unfortunately, people had to hit rock bottom for things to change. I hate that it's so, but it seems like people never ever do anything until they hits rock bottom, and that's when people are like, oh, well, now we should stop.
Yeah, I mean, you raise an interesting point because it reminds me of that British feminist Julie Bindel, who had that interview with Red Femme Hub, and she said that she thinks all men should be put in concentration camps, and they're, if they have women who love them and care about them, those women can come and check them out of the camps like library books. And the first thing I have to say to that is, okay, let's put all the men in the evil, horrible men. Let's take them all and put them in concentration camps. Who's going to run the supply lines? The aviation industry, the railway industry. Who's going to maintain the sewage systems? Who's going to maintain the power grid? Who's going to build the roads and build the skyscrapers and all of these things that are done mostly by men? You think women are just going to step up and suddenly start doing all those things? I don't think so. And I'm not saying that women can't do those things if they don't want to. It's just that for the most part, women choose not to do those things. They're not interested in doing those things. It's mostly men who do the gross, icky, backbreaking kind of jobs. And if you just remove men from society, and that's kind of, by the same token, that's kind of what's happening with MGTOW, is where, a lot of these guys are just kind of dropping out of society, and they're saying, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to play anymore. And, if every man did that, then society probably would collapse because there'd be nobody doing all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's I do think if things don't stop, if feminism doesn't stop, society would probably collapse because there are just things that women can't do, just like men cannot give birth to children. Men are also physically stronger than women. We are a sexual dimorphic species. And I believe that women have like what 60% of the strength that a man has. So there are things that men could probably do. There are plenty of things that men could do that women can't do. It's kind of like it would be hard for a woman to pass the exam to be a firefighter. In fact, there has been a woman who asked for the training to be lowered, be made softer so she could pass it, because the things that an average firefighter could do is something beyond what a woman could do.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great example of affirmative action going out of control, because that's a situation that actually puts people's lives at risk. Like, if you're trapped in a burning building and you need a firefighter to come save you, do you want someone who got the job because the standards were lowered for her, or do you want someone who's going to be able to carry you out of there? Or even their coworkers, like, say she's on the job and she's in a burning building with one of her male coworkers who weighs 70 pounds more than she does. And something happens to him, like he gets knocked out by a piece of debris or something like that. Is she going to be able to carry him out of there? Or are they both going to die in that building while she tries to get him out of there?
Yeah, exactly. The standards for firefighter was lowered just for her because she's a woman and she couldn't meet those standards. There are things that men can do that women just are not physically capable of doing. And if we keep doing this to men, then I I do think MGTOW will probably grow stronger and stronger, because, the opposite reaction, because men would wake up and realize that no matter what they do, feminists will never be happy. And the sad part is, it's very few women that are feminists, but they have the loudest voices. And for some reason, men listen to them because they are afraid of being called a woman hater. They are afraid.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's motivated by fear in both directions, because what do feminists, not only do they tell men, well, oh, you hate women if you don't agree with us, look at what they also tell women. I saw this article about how Harvard is now telling female students that why they're repeating the 1 in 5 statistic. 1 in 5 women will be raped during their college career. Now they're telling them, oh well, you're going to be, someone is going to have this happen to them. And they're basically just telling them that if you don't adopt these feminist principles, and if you don't spread these feminist principles, this is what's going to happen to you. They're saying it as if it's this absolute inevitable thing that can't be avoided. So it really is about fear on both sides of it. It's about just making people scared of the alternative to adopting this ideological position.
Yeah, and I don't know how far it's gonna go, but if it doesn't stop soon, and I don't, think it's gonna stop anytime soon, unfortunately, the way it's always been for the human species is that people always have to hit rock bottom until they think, wait just a minute, maybe we should stop right now. But people usually don't stop until they hit rock bottom. That's when reforms, start taking place. I've know that Christianity has different reforms. There's the reform during the era of Martin Luther, and Christianity, its power, its influence has been dying down, because of the Salem witch trials, and we didn't want to repeat of that. And then there's the satanic panic, and because of all this, people don't take Christianity as seriously anymore. But now you have the rise of feminism, and now we're just in this where it's like history is repeating itself. It's like we didn't learn from the satanic panic. We're just doing this shits all over again, and unfortunately, we would just probably have to hit rock bottom.
Yeah, I mean, I think Christianity has pretty much reached a point where it's basically a benign belief system. I mean, yes, there are obviously still some extremist Christians. Like there are people like the Westboro Baptist Church, but they're a very very small minority. And I think for the most part, it's interesting. I used to be much more of like an edgy, like fedora tipping, like Reddit kind of atheist when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. But I've sort of mellowed out, and I've come to realize that Christianity isn't all that bad. That there are obviously bad things that have resulted from it, but at present, I'm much more concerned about Islam, and I'm much more concerned about feminism and social justice warfare and identity politics, which I think those things are sort of a religion unto themselves. Because they're well, like okay, Christians and Muslims have Satan, feminists have the patriarchy. Christians and Muslims have God, feminists have femininity. Worshiping at the altar of womanhood. There's a lot of belief involved in all of these things, and I'm pretty much mostly concerned about whatever is doing the most damage.
Yes.
And
Oh, sorry.
no, no, you're fine. I was just gonna say that my dad is really religious, and raised me to be a Christian and everything, and I went through that phase of sort of resenting that and being against it. But at this point, I'm kind of grateful for those Christian values, because even though I'm not religious, I don't consider myself a Christian or anything like that. It did inform a lot of the logic behind why I'm against feminism, why I'm against Islam, why I'm against identity politics, is because I think people deserve to be treated equally. Don't you shouldn't do things to harm others. You shouldn't lie or cheat or steal or murder or any of these things like that. So even though I'm not really religious in any sense of the word, I do credit Christian values for a lot of the values that I have now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that some Christianity is a benign religion now. A lot of its power has died down, and I think it's much more of a benign, friendly religion. And people who are Christians are more live and let live now. It's now feminism and social justice warriorism and Black Lives Matter that are throwing their beliefs in your face. But I do think with how many atheists and because most of feminists and most social justice warriors are atheists, I do think that they show the power of fighting back because Christians they used to be a certain way, but because of all the fighting back, they just kind of calm down. But it does show the power of fighting back, and it does show that if we keep fighting back, if we just keep fighting back, it would eventually work.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that we should just keep letting them talk. Keep letting them air their grievances because I think most people can see at face value why this stuff is bullshit. They can see the ways in which it's dangerous, and it just takes people on our side of it talking about it more and more and sort of providing counterpoint. And as long as the conversation keeps going, the average person is going to look at it and see that we're right, and that the feminists and social justice warriors are the ones who want to oppress people and want to force people to agree with them and to live how they want.
Yeah, but it's kind of like how I was thinking about Gasi Koso, Sargon of Akkad. He did a new video on Gasi Koso, and you can see him crying because the police killed his friend. But he said that there was many things, but and his friend dying for the police was the ultimate thing. However, I've been watching Gasi Koso myself, and some of his influences were Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Joy DeGruy. And when I watched Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome, I mean, Joy DeGruy, she's very well spoken. She's like a con artist or a sociopath because she's very, very charming. She's charismatic and she's very influential. I mean, she's very well spoken, very, very, very well spoken. And she was talking. I didn't buy post traumatic slave syndrome, but I did watch three of the documentaries, and she went over all the horrible things in history that white people did to black people, and brought it all the way up to modern day presidents. And you can see the white audience in tears. You can see so many white people crying and whatnot. But the problem is, there was the Irish slave trade, and I don't know if it's correct or not because I haven't did too much research on the Irish slave trade, but from what I did read, it said that the Irish had it worse than black people, and it's kind of like it leaves things out, like like the abolitionists were full of white people who were against slavery. It's just all she does is went over all the horrible, terrible things that white people did in history and some modern day presence, and she's trying to create white guilt. And she had this question at the end: do you believe that white people could be racist? And then everybody stands it up. Then she says, do you think that black people could be racist? some hands went up. And it's just like, well, tell me how all the ways black people could be affected when with white racism. And people's, named all the ways that, black people could be affected by white racism. This just says, name all the ways that white people, as a collective, could be affected by black racism. Not an individual black person, not like this black person hurt you, but name how white people could be affected by black racism. And nobody could name any. However, I'll say this: we are now having laws put in place like affirmative action that helps black people, and it puts white people who probably deserve more at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, and something I find really disturbing is that I don't know if you remember the Democratic candidate Jim Webb. I actually liked him quite a bit, and in one of the early debates in the presidential race, he actually mentioned that how affirmative action was discriminatory against poor white people, like impoverished whites, and basically the entire Democratic Party and the entire Democratic voting bloc laughed him out of the race for saying that. And he was speaking the truth. He was absolutely right. But you can't say stuff like that because God forbid you acknowledge that there's a way that white people could be discriminated against.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, Shirley Graham was like, how could black people, be racist towards white people? How could, and it's kind of like, the thing is, even though as a black person, I probably cannot affect white people all around the world, but if white people turn against other white people, and many white people are good natured, many of them try to do good, it does, creates a situation where so many white people are calling other white people racist for anything that is perceived as racist, and white people lose their job over being called racist, even if they have a black girlfriend, even if they have plenty of black friends. You are a white person, you can get called a racist for any trivial thing, even like a joke.
Yeah. I mean, like Gavin McInnes or what's his name, Jim Norton. Both of them are married to black women, and yet people call them racist all the time. It's like if they're really racist, how could they get married to a black woman and spend the rest of their life with them? How does that make any sense?
Oh, the black women are internalizing white supremacy.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I got accused of something like that. A person was like, "You're racist against black people," and I'm like, "I'm black myself," and they were like white supremacists love you. You are speaking for white supremacists, and they just keep telling me that I'm anti-black, and even a white guy told me how anti-black I am and how racist I am against
Oh
black people.
man.
How I speak the word of white supremacy.
It reminds me of this clip I saw on MSNBC. The newscaster Tamron Hall, she's a black woman, and she was talking about how, oh well, Donald Trump is a racist, and a lot of people say he's a racist. Let's go to this Donald Trump rally and talk to one of his supporters. And they roll the clip of the MSNBC team talking to one of Donald Trump's supporters. Turns out it's a black guy, and the guy starts saying, well, I'm tired of this race baiting stuff, and I'm tired of, all the racism accusations. The David Duke thing has nothing to do with Donald Trump, and we're all Americans, and we should all just get along, and recognize that we're all countrymen, and all this and that. Nobody cares about David Duke. And then they go back to Tamron Hall, and she's like, oh well, well, we don't know how many black people were there, and obviously most Trump supporters aren't. But she just, she starts doing damage control because she wasn't expecting the Trump supporter to be a black guy.
And she said, not all black people think like him. Like of course,
Yeah.
black you don't agree. Um,
Yeah,
Yes.
it's like if you're a black person and you have your own opinion and you don't just automatically agree with the Democratic Party, then they call you all kinds of horrible names. They call you coon and Uncle Tom and house nigger and all these horrible things, just for having your own opinion. And then they sit there and say that you're the racist and you're the horrible person because you're not just automatically agreeing with their agenda, you know. And I mean, I'm not black, but I would imagine that that would be really frustrating and offensive as a black person.
Yeah. So, how do you feel? I'm gonna try to get your opinion on each president's nominee. Obviously, we know it's gonna come down to Trump or Hillary, but I did see you talk about Bernie Sanders on your YouTube videos, so I'm just gonna go over Bernie, Ted Cruz, Hillary, and Trump. I'm just gonna go down a list. Okay, so first, what's your opinion on Bernie Sanders?
Um, well, obviously, I don't agree with a lot of his policies because of that video I did about him. Um, but I do at least think, to his credit, I at least think that he's an honest person. That he is he says what he really thinks, and I may not agree with what he really thinks, but he at least has the decency to mostly stick to his principles. I did talk in my video about how um, he's not really being totally honest about the anti-war thing, because he has supported the military and he has supported war measures in the past. And I'm not even necessarily saying that that's a bad thing. The thing that's bad is that he's claiming, he's falsely claiming that he's against those things. Is the issue I have with it. But other than that, I think he says what he really thinks and what he really believes, and I can respect that at least. Um, it's mostly his supporters that I have a real problem with because they're the ones going to Trump rallies and starting riots and just generally instigating problems, instigating violence and blocking roads and all that stuff. Those are the ones I really have an issue with. It's not so much Bernie himself, but on the other hand, Bernie hasn't done a very good job of condemning that. He basically just denied that it has anything to do with him or his supporters. Um, so that I don't really like.
Yeah, I like Bernie Sanders. I like him because I think he's the most honest nominee we have. So I like him for his honesty. Though I do think a lot of his I think he's naive. I think he's very naive. I think he's unrealistic. I think he's a bit senile. But I do like his honesty. And because I believe he's senile, I do think what would have happened if he did become president is I think that, everybody else would have just taken over and he would just be a figurehead. I think that everybody else, like the Congress and the House and the Senate, they'll just take over, and
Yeah,
none of his ideas would get through because he seems delusional, like in the sense that he thinks the president has more power than the president actually has. So I don't think any of his goals would ever get accomplished because like the president doesn't have the power to do this or that anyway. So I think he'd just be this silly old man as accomplishing nothing.
yeah. I mean, his ideas are. It's not even so much that they're radical. I think I touched on this in my video as well. He's basically just saying, let's expand these big government programs that we already have and let's make them even bigger. Um, but even so, I don't think Congress would really be willing to go along with that. And he would basically end up, like you were saying, he would end up either getting nothing done or he would have to do a lot of executive orders to get things done. And that's, doing executive orders is decidedly undemocratic, which would put him in an awkward position of calling himself a democratic socialist and then just being, a state socialist.
Yeah. So, how do you feel about Ted Cruz?
Um, To be perfectly honest, I actually don't mind Ted Cruz all that much, because his voting record is actually very consistent with the things that he's been saying throughout the race. He doesn't seem like a terrible guy, um, but he just couldn't hack it. That's mainly the problem I have with him is he couldn't hack it. He couldn't beat Donald Trump, and I have a little bit of respect for him in that he was willing to finally drop out and finally admit defeat. Instead of trying to get a contested convention, trying to mess things up for the party. Um, but I think his motivation for dropping out probably had something to do with wanting to keep his Senate seat, because he was kind of in this position of either we can either go all the way and try to get a contested convention and drive all these people away from the Republican Party, or I can just accept the loss and not look like a dick and keep my Senate seat. So I think he's very much a calculating kind of person, and I'm not saying I fault him for that. Um, but yeah, that's basically it. I don't think he's terrible, but he doesn't have the balls that Trump has, plain and simple.
Okay, so how do you feel about Hillary Clinton?
I think if I woke up tomorrow and read a headline that Hillary Clinton had been killed in a fiery plane crash, I would probably throw a fucking party because I hate Hillary Clinton. She's the worst person in the race. I think she's a disgusting human being. She's probably the most dishonest person in the race, and possibly one of the most dishonest politicians of our generation. And I hope she loses. I hope she crashes and burns. Um, and it's not that I'm against a woman being president. Just that woman is not Hillary Clinton. I would be fine with an intelligent, honest, reasonable, principled woman being president, but not Hillary Clinton. No way, no how. I mean, she's a feminist. She panders to the social justice warrior stuff, um, and she seems like she's willing to say pretty much anything. And she's basically just the epitome of everything that I hate about politics. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Yeah, if Hillary Clinton were to just die in a fiery plane crash, I think I'll throw a party myself. We should party together. We could just have this YouTube party. We could just get drunk and everything and enjoy ourselves.
I'm sure when God Emperor Trump wins the election and Hillary goes on stage and cries about how she only lost because of sexism, I think the entire anti-SJW community will be throwing a big party on YouTube.
Though many social justice warriors and many people they don't like Hillary Clinton, especially Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter definitely hates Hillary Clinton. They are very pro Bernie, and many people are saying Bernie Sanders, the true feminist, Bernie Sanders, the real social justice warrior, Bernie Sanders, the real progressive, and they're like, please, we're not falling for Hillary's lies and manipulations, because from my experience on, Twitter, has been my experience. I say Hillary Clinton sucks. Donald Trump sucks. I mean, that's my opinion. And when I say Hillary Clinton sucks, a bunch of people are liking it. I'm getting some retweets. But if I say Donald Trump sucks, that's where all the criticisms come in.
Yeah, I mean Trump has a very rabid fan base online, and I think that has helped him a little bit because memes have become a big part of politics. One good solid meme can make or break somebody, I think. But as far as Bernie being the real social justice warrior and like SJW saying things like that, I've noticed that too. And I think part of it is that Hillary Clinton is a big Wall Street funded candidate. She's a big corporate candidate, and for the social justice warriors and the feminists, that seems to outweigh. It seems to outweigh the fact that she's a woman, and they end up not caring that she's a woman because they still see her as like part of the big evil establishment. So they see Bernie as the underdog, and they like the things that he says about women. You know, like I played that one clip in my video of him calling single moms heroes. And you know, in the clip of him saying he wants equal pay, even though we already have equal pay, you know, repeating that lie, and the way he panders to Black Lives Matter in a way that Hillary has kind of failed to do. But at the same time, it's really bizarre because Bernie only seems to win the mostly white states, and in states like of course I'm drawing a blank, but for the most part, states with high concentrations of black people have mostly gone to Hillary Clinton. So it's this kind of bizarre catch-22 where black people in general seem to prefer Hillary Clinton, but Black Lives Matter hates Hillary Clinton.
It is weird because, yeah, when I'm in Twitter, many people who hate Hillary Clinton are Black Lives Matter. It's kind of like, drop out of the race, Hillary, hashtag Black Lives Matter. And, I see all these Black Lives Matter people talking about how much they hate Hillary, and many white progressives that came out of college, they hate Hillary Clinton because they look at Bernie Sanders, they look at Hillary Clinton, and they see that he's more progressive and he is more in sync with their progressive values. So I'm not surprised that many white people like Bernie Sanders, because many social justice warriors that come out of college are whites. But I am surprised by how many black people like Hillary Clinton. That surprises me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really I don't really have a good explanation for it myself because I'm only 27, so I don't know what Hillary or Bernie's career was really like before my lifetime. I didn't really go that far back for my Bernie video. I mostly focused on more recent things like within the last 10, 15 years. But somehow she did it. Somehow she convinced black people that she's the candidate for them. I don't get it, but she did it somehow.
It could be because Bill Clinton was president before Hillary Clinton, and many
He
many
was the first. He was the first black president, right?
yes, yes, he's the first black president. Many black people have taken a liking to Bill Clinton. Like, I mean, you should see how black celebrities talk about Bill Clinton. So like so many black celebrities, they stand up for him. It's kind of like, I remember Chris Rock doing a comedy sketch where it's like where he was talking about Monica Lewinsky incident, and he's like, that's not Pastor Clinton, that's not Reverend Clinton, he is a president. And I wish I was president too and was able that any woman who sucks my cock could be famous.
Yeah, it's like that meme. We need a woman in the Oval Office, and then it cuts to Bill. Trust me, there's been plenty.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many black entertainers that just love Bill Clinton. So I am I think that's why so many people like Hillary Clinton, she's just benefiting from being married to Bill Clinton.
Yeah, I mean, brand recognition is really important, and I mean, even without being married to Bill Clinton, Hillary has had a really long career, even before she was married to Bill, and if she had been around this long, then I think that would have helped her, because really that's what elections come down to is name recognition in general. Like that was part of why Trump creamed his opposition so much, was because everyone knows who Donald Trump is. Everybody's heard the name Donald Trump, but not everybody has heard of Ted Cruz or Carly Fiorina or Rand Paul or anyone else who was in the race. So he just both he and Hillary have had that advantage over their opposition because I you know I remember like 5 years ago when I was a progressive like socialist type. I loved Bernie Sanders. I thought he was fucking great, and I was like, man, I wish Bernie would run for president. And now flash forward, now more and more people have heard who Bernie is, and it's like, man, I did it before it was cool. You know?
Yeah, yeah, I think his name recognition. I think that Donald Trump is benefiting from his celebrity status from doing the Apprentice, the Celebrity Apprentice. It was really popular. Many people watched the show, and people just want to vote for their favorite celebrity. I think he's benefiting from his fame, and I mean, not only that, but I mean, I must say that Trump supporters, they do have some real talents, like, unfortunately many of them are from the alt right, and they believe in white genocide. But I saw this cool alt right Donald Trump video where they were just, it was just really awesome. I mean, you did see them flashing white genocide, but it was still a cool video. It's like, wow, this video is actually pretty cool. Though I don't agree with the white genocide message, and not like that, but I mean, you can see them putting Donald Trump's face on the Game of Thrones. I think they changed it to the Game of Trump.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of great edits. Like I saw one, I saw the Game of Thrones one where they're basically talking about like building a wall to keep the rivaling tribes out. And then I saw a Terminator one from the first Terminator movie, where of course Trump is the Terminator, and he goes into the biker bar to get the suit and get the bike and everything, and all the other candidates are in there, and then Ted Cruz is the one who comes out with the shotgun as Trump is getting on the bike, and he's like, count to 10, Donald, like like what he said in one of the debates. and of course Trump gets off the bike and like disarms the guy, and then rides off to bad to the bone. And there's just so many great memes this election. Like this is the meme election.
Yeah, I've seen all of those. Those were so entertaining. Yeah, I've seen so many of them, and they were so much fun to watch. I mean, Donald Trump is, I mean, even their artwork, their artwork when it comes to Donald Trump, I mean, they have real talent.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the alt-right goes, I hear the term thrown around a lot, and it gets associated with like neo-Nazis and identitarians and all these different, frowned upon like far-right groups. But really, I don't even know what the term alt-right means, to be perfectly honest, because it's been applied to so many things, and it's just sort of become this like poisoned, dirty word. When I don't think it's ever really been properly defined. I mean, the term has only been around for a few years now, and all it really means to me is like, I don't particularly like the Republican Party. I like the Democrats even less. I consider myself, sort of to the right, sort of conservative, but not really in line with the traditional Republican Party. So I guess by that general vague definition, I guess you could say that I'm alt-right, but at the same time, I'm not a neo-Nazi. I'm not one of these identitarian guys or white genocide or anything like that. So I feel like it's sort of just become a smear term that people roll out when they're ready to try and tar and feather somebody, but it doesn't actually mean much of anything.
Yeah, but people who call themselves alt-rights and say that they are alt-rights, they do seem to believe some very racist things like white genocide.
Yeah, or they openly believe that white people are superior to other groups of people, and things like that, and stuff like that. Obviously, I don't agree with. I think judging people as groups in general is kind of stupid. I think that people should be judged as individuals based on what they say and what they think, what their actions are. You shouldn't judge somebody just because they belong to a particular ethnic group or anything like that.
So, uh, I've asked you how you feel about Bernie, Ted Cruz, Hillary. How do you feel about Donald Trump?
Um, I voted for him in the Illinois primary. I live in Illinois, and I voted for him because I feel that he is the best candidate to shake things up. I don't necessarily agree with him on everything. I understand why some people might be apprehensive about him. They might be concerned about some of his policies, like wanting to put tariffs on China. I'm not an economist, but I understand that there might be some economic blowback from something like that if you were able to do it. I understand why people might be concerned about something like what he said about libel laws, wanting to open up libel laws. I think there are valid criticisms of Donald Trump, and I understand why people might take those positions. But at the same time, the criticisms that we hear in the mainstream media of like, oh, he hates women, he's racist, he hates Mexicans, he hates black people, he's homophobic, like all these stock criticisms that they roll out, I don't agree with any of those because my dad is a legal immigrant to the United States. He came here from Egypt. He worked really hard to come here the right way and pass those background checks and pay the money to get into this country and get on a plane to get over here. And I think that immigration law needs to be enforced. And that's one of my big reasons for voting for Donald Trump is because the illegal immigration situation has gotten completely ridiculous. The current administration is not even trying to enforce the law. And in fact, Barack Obama changed the definition of what constitutes a deportation in order to make it look like his administration was enforcing the law. He changed the definition so that it would include people who were caught at the border, like just across the U.S. side of the border. Apparently, that counts as a deportation now, when before his administration it didn't. So there are things, it's things like that make me support Donald Trump because basically his position on immigration is enforce the law, enforce the existing law. So if he were to become president, his administration would be able to order the Justice Department to do that without any act of Congress, without Congress having to do anything for him. And even on the Muslims thing, people criticize him for the, let's keep out Muslims thing. Not only do I not really disagree with that, but it would actually be completely illegal for a standing president to do that. Here, let me have it bookmarked here. Let me just pull it up really quick. Yeah, pursuant to 8 U.S. Code Section 1182, inadmissible aliens, Section F, that's a lowercase f. I'm just reading this here. Suspension of entry or imposition of restrictions by president. Whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions that he may deem to be appropriate. So, I'm not a legal scholar or anything, but if I'm understanding this correctly, basically what that means is the president can just say, no people from this country, no people from that country, and he can just do that whenever he wants. So whether anyone agrees with Trump's stance on Islamic immigrants, whether you agree with that or not, whether or not it hurts your feelings or not, it would actually be perfectly legal for him to do that if he wanted to say no people from this country, no people from that country. He could do that as president. And in fact, Barack Obama did this, I think it was in 2011. He did this with Iraqi asylum seekers, with Iraqi immigrants, and said no Iraqis for, I think it was 6 months. I'm just, don't quote me here because I'm just going off the top of my head. But Barack Obama did this, used this power during his presidency, and no one called him a racist. No one attacked him for it. So, there were just a lot of things that people are attacking Trump for saying and yet previous presidents have actually done them, and nobody wants to talk about that. So, you know, whether you love or hate Trump, he hasn't said anything that another president hasn't already done. And he certainly hasn't done anything yet because he's not president yet.
Okay. Is there anything that you wish your audience knew about you?
I mean, I guess I'm trying not to get too personal. I mean, I kind of divulged some personal details already. But I don't know. I mean, I guess anything that I want my audience to know about me, I'm probably going to mention in my videos or mention in a hangout at some point or another. But I can't think of anything specific right now. No.
All right. Are you willing to take questions from the audience?
Yeah, sure. If anyone in the chat has a question, I see 4 people are watching. If anyone has a question, shoot, go ahead.
Yeah, does anybody have a question that they would like to ask them before we close? Going once? Going twice? All right, we're closing. Goodbye, everyone.
And thank you for having me, Summer.
Yeah, you're welcome to come back anytime you want. Goodbye.
Awesome.
All right.